He saw the child sitting alone on the cold pavement and looked away. People always did. But then, a sudden cry shattered the noise of the street. Not loud, not dramatic, just broken. And in that moment, one man's decision, to stop or keep walking, changed two lives forever. The city never slept, but it never truly noticed either. Cars rushed past. Horns blared. Neon lights flickered. And people moved with purpose. Heads down. Hearts guarded. Ethan walked through the crowd like everyone else, tired after a long shift, his mind heavy with unpaid bills and unanswered regrets. He was late, hungry, and emotionally exhausted. That's when he saw the child. A small figure sat near the curb, knees pulled to his chest, clothes thin against the cold. Ethan looked once, just once. His instinct screamed, "Don't get involved." Life had taught him that caring came with a cost. He turned away, taking 3 steps forward. Then he heard it. A cry, not loud, not desperate enough to demand attention, but raw, fragile, the kind of sound that didn't ask for help, because it had already learned not to expect any. Ethan froze. Memory stirred. His own childhood. The nights he'd gone to bed hungry while his father drank away what little they had. He swallowed hard. "Not my problem," he told himself. That's what everyone said, but his feet wouldn't move. The cry echoed again, softer now, like it was losing strength. And suddenly, Ethan realized the most dangerous thing in the world wasn't cruelty. It was indifference. Slowly, against every instinct he'd built to survive, he turned back. The boy looked up as Ethan approached, eyes wide but dull, like hope had already packed its bags and left. Dirt smudged his cheeks, and his hands shook, not from fear, but from cold. Ethan knelt, unsure what to say. Words felt inadequate in the presence of something so broken. Are you alone?" Ethan asked gently. The boy nodded. No tears fell. That worried him more. "What's your name?" "Leo," the child whispered, barely audible over the traffic. Ethan offered his jacket without thinking. Leo hesitated, then took it, clutching it like something precious. Hunger twisted Ethan's stomach, not his own, but the kind you recognize when you felt it before. "Have you eaten today?" Leo shook his head again. People walked past them. Some glanced. Most didn't. Ethan felt anger rise, not at them, but at himself. He had almost been one of them. "Where's your mom?" Ethan asked carefully. Leo stared at the ground. "She said she'd come back." Those words hit harder than any scream. Ethan knew that sentence. He'd lived it. Promises that dissolved into silence. "How long have you been here?" 2 days. Ethan's breath caught. 2 days of waiting. 2 days of believing. That's when he understood. This wasn't just a moment. This was a crossroads. And walking away now would haunt him forever. Ethan bought Leo food from a nearby stall. Warm bread, soup, something simple. The boy ate slowly, like he was afraid it might disappear if he rushed. Ethan watched, guilt tightening his chest. He thought about all the times he complained about small inconveniences, never realizing how close some people lived to the edge. "Thank you," Leo said quietly. Those 2 words shattered Ethan more than the cry had. Gratitude from a child who had nothing felt undeserved. "Do you know where you live?" Ethan asked. Leo nodded but didn't speak. "Can you take me there?" After a pause, the boy stood. His legs trembled, but he didn't complain. They walked through narrow streets until they reached a crumbling apartment building. The door was locked, windows dark. "She's not here," Leo whispered, like saying it softly might make it less true. Ethan crouched beside him. "When did you last see her?" "Before the man shouted," Leo said. "She told me to wait." Ethan felt something crack inside him. He didn't ask more. Some stories didn't need details to be devastating. The truth settled heavily. Leo had been waiting for someone who might never come back. And now Ethan was standing in front of a choice. Step in, or step away forever. Ethan called social services, but the line was busy. The night grew colder. Leo leaned closer without realizing it, seeking warmth. Ethan placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, feeling how thin he was. "You can stay with me tonight," Ethan said before he could second-guess himself. Leo looked up, fear and hope colliding in his eyes. "Really?" Ethan nodded. "Just for tonight." That night changed everything. At Ethan's small apartment, Leo showered and slept on the couch, clutching the jacket like a shield. Ethan sat awake, watching him breathe, memories flooding back. He remembered wishing anyone, had noticed him when he was a child. He realized something painful and powerful. Sometimes, second chances aren't given to fix the past, but to redeem the present. In the silence, Ethan understood that this wasn't charity. It was responsibility. It was humanity. And for the first time in years, his life, once numb and directionless, felt like it had purpose. But with morning would come hard decisions, questions, consequences. Still, as Leo slept peacefully for the first time in days, Ethan knew one thing with absolute certainty. Turning back had saved them both. Morning sunlight crept into the room, and Leo stirred, confused at first, then calm. Safe. Ethan made breakfast with what little he had. They ate together in silence, a quiet comfort settling between them. Social services arrived later that day. Questions were asked. Files opened. Leo's mother couldn't be found. Temporary foster care was suggested. Leo's fingers tightened around Ethan's sleeve. That simple gesture broke the last wall Ethan had left standing. "I'll take responsibility," Ethan said, surprising even himself. "At least until things are clear." The caseworker studied him carefully. "This won't be easy." Ethan nodded. "I know." That night, as Leo slept in the spare bed Ethan borrowed from a neighbor, Ethan stared at the ceiling, fear and hope wrestling inside him. His life was no longer just his own, but regret no longer lived there either. Because sometimes the smallest decision, to stop, to listen, to care, becomes the moment everything changes, and all it took was one cry, heard by someone who finally chose not to walk away. The days that followed were not gentle. Ethan quickly learned that love alone didn't erase paperwork, background checks, or the weight of responsibility. Leo was quiet, always polite, as if afraid that being too much might make Ethan disappear too. That fear showed in the way he followed Ethan from room to room, and how he flinched whenever Ethan raised his voice. Even when it was only to answer a phone call, Ethan noticed everything. At night, Leo woke from nightmares, whispering his mother's name into the dark. Ethan would sit beside the bed, unsure what to say, knowing he couldn't promise what he didn't know. Instead, he stayed. Sometimes, presence was the only honesty possible. At work, Ethan's performance slipped. His boss warned him once, then twice. Bills piled up. Friends questioned his choices. "You didn't ask for this," they said. And they were right. But Ethan remembered the way Leo's hand had tightened around his sleeve that first day. He remembered the sound of the cry that had stopped him. One evening, Leo asked quietly, "Will I have to leave?" The question shattered Ethan. He knelt down, meeting Leo's eyes. "I don't know what will happen," he admitted, "but I won't stop trying." Leo nodded, absorbing the answer with a maturity no child should have. That night, Ethan realized kindness wasn't heroic. It was costly. And once chosen, it demanded endurance, not just emotion. Social services located Leo's mother a week later. The news arrived without celebration. She was alive, but struggling. Addiction, instability, promises broken more than once. The kind of situation that lived in gray spaces, not absolutes. Leo listened quietly as the caseworker explained supervised visits. He didn't cry. That worried Ethan most. The first visit was painful. Leo's mother hugged him tightly, tears streaming, words tumbling out too fast. "I'm sorry," she repeated. "I never meant to leave you." Leo nodded, stiff in her arms. Ethan watched from across the room, emotions twisting inside him. He wanted to hate her, but he saw something familiar. Brokenness. Regret. A person who had once loved deeply, but lost her way. Afterward, Leo didn't speak the entire ride home. That night, he finally whispered, "If she gets better, will you stop caring?" Ethan's chest tightened. "Caring isn't something you turn off," he said gently, "even when things change." Leo stared at the ceiling. People leave when things change. Ethan had no perfect answer. Instead, he said the truth. Sometimes, but sometimes, people stay in different ways. It wasn't comforting. It was honest. And in that honesty, a fragile trust continued to grow, slow, cautious, but real. Weeks passed. Leo returned to school. Ethan attended meetings, therapy sessions, parenting classes he never imagined himself in. He learned how deeply trauma could root itself into a child's silence. One afternoon, Leo came home with a drawing. It showed 3 figures holding hands. 2 were labeled. 1 wasn't. "Who's that?" Ethan asked. Leo shrugged. "Someone who didn't leave." Ethan swallowed hard. That night, Leo finally broke. The tears came fast and fierce, years of fear pouring out. "I waited," he cried. "I waited and waited." Ethan held him, feeling the weight of those words sink into his bones. Waiting was its own kind of suffering, a quiet one, invisible to the world. "I should have cried louder," Leo sobbed. "No," Ethan said firmly. "You shouldn't have had to cry at all." In that moment, Ethan understood something profound. Saving someone didn't mean fixing their pain. It meant sharing it, carrying it when it became too heavy. And as Leo cried himself to sleep, Ethan made a silent promise, not to replace anyone, not to rewrite the past, but to ensure that from this moment forward, Leo would never feel invisible again. The court decision came suddenly. Temporary custody would end. Leo's mother had entered rehabilitation. Reunification was the goal. Ethan felt relief and grief collide inside him. Leo said nothing when he heard. He packed his small bag slowly, deliberately. Like each folded shirt was a goodbye he didn't know how to say. On the last night, Leo asked, "Did I change your life?" Ethan smiled sadly. "You reminded me I still had one." Leo nodded, absorbing the weight of that. The goodbye was quiet. No dramatic words. Just a long hug that said everything neither of them could speak. As Leo walked away, Ethan felt the ache of doing the right thing, even when it hurt. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Leo was doing better. His mother was trying. Healing wasn't perfect, but it had begun. Ethan sat alone, holding the letter, realizing that love didn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it meant letting go with hope. Months passed. Life settled into a new rhythm, quieter, different. Then one evening, there was a knock at the door. Ethan opened it slowly and froze. Leo stood there, taller now, smiling nervously. Beside him, his mother, healthier, humble. "We wanted to say thank you," she said softly, "for stopping." Leo stepped forward and hugged Ethan tightly. "You heard me," Leo whispered. Ethan closed his eyes. In that moment, he understood the truth he would carry forever. You never know which small decision will echo across a lifetime. He had looked once. He had almost turned away. But he listened. And because he did, 2 lives had been forever changed. Life didn't magically soften after Leo left. Ethan returned to empty evenings and quiet mornings, but he was no longer the same man who once walked past a crying child. The silence now carried meaning. It reminded him that compassion, once awakened, never truly goes back to sleep. He volunteered at a local shelter on weekends, helping children with homework, listening more than speaking. He noticed how many of them avoided eye contact, how many flinched at raised voices. Trauma had a familiar language. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan replayed Leo's voice in his mind. "You heard me." Those words stayed with him, grounding him during moments of doubt. Then one afternoon, Ethan received another call from social services. Leo's mother was struggling again, not failing, but fragile. Rehabilitation was not a straight line. Supervised support was being expanded, and they asked if Ethan would remain involved as a stable figure. He hesitated, not because he didn't care, but because he did. Opening that door again meant reopening old wounds. Yet he knew absence could be just as damaging as instability. "I'll help," Ethan said quietly. That night, he realized something powerful. Second chances weren't only given to those who made mistakes. Sometimes they were given to those willing to stay, again and again, without guarantees. And for the first time, Ethan understood that love wasn't a moment. It was a commitment. Leo returned slowly, cautiously, like someone stepping onto thin ice. Their visits were short at first, awkward silences, nervous smiles, unspoken memories hovering between them. But children heal in layers, not leaps. Leo began opening up again, sharing stories from school, dreams he didn't fully understand yet. Ethan listened without interrupting, without fixing. He had learned that presence mattered more than advice. One evening, Leo asked, "Do you ever regret stopping?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He thought about the sleepless nights, the fear, the inevitable goodbye. "No," he said finally. "Some things hurt because they matter." Leo nodded, absorbing that truth quietly. Ethan noticed how Leo's mother watched them, grateful, ashamed, hopeful. She was trying, stumbling forward with honesty. There was no villain in this story, just broken people learning how to hold themselves together. That realization softened Ethan's anger. He stopped seeing the situation as something to win or lose. It wasn't about replacing anyone. It was about adding stability where it was needed. And slowly, trust began to rebuild. Not perfectly, not easily, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to believe. Sometimes healing doesn't come from erasing the past, but from building something steady alongside it. Years passed in quiet growth. Leo grew taller, louder, more confident. His laughter came easier now. His fears still surfaced, but they no longer controlled him. Ethan attended school events, birthdays, awkward teenage conversations. He became a constant, not a savior, not a substitute, but something just as important, someone who stayed. Leo's mother found her footing too. She stumbled, yes, but she stood back up. Recovery wasn't perfect, but it was real. One afternoon, as they sat together watching the city from a park bench, Leo said, "I don't remember everything from that day." Ethan smiled gently. "That's okay." "But I remember the sound," Leo continued. "My own voice. And yours." Ethan felt his throat tighten. Leo turned to him. "I think that's when I learned I mattered." Those words landed heavily. Ethan realized then that his decision hadn't just altered circumstances. It had shaped identity. Being heard had taught Leo self-worth, and being needed had taught Ethan purpose. They sat in comfortable silence, understanding that some connections didn't require labels. They simply existed. Because sometimes the most important relationships aren't defined by blood, but by moments when someone chooses not to walk away. On Leo's graduation day, the auditorium buzzed with applause. Ethan sat in the crowd, hands clasped tightly, heart pounding like it was his own milestone. When Leo's name was called, he stood tall. Their eyes met across the room. Leo smiled. Later, outside under open skies, Leo hugged Ethan tightly. "You didn't save me," he said. "You saw me." Ethan laughed softly, wiping away tears. "You saved yourself." They both knew the truth lived somewhere in between. Life had tested them in different ways, but compassion had bridged the gaps fear once created. Ethan thought back to the night. He almost didn't stop. One glance, one step away. He understood now. Life doesn't change through grand gestures. It changes through small, inconvenient acts of courage. Listening, staying, caring. Leo walked forward into his future carrying strength, not scars. And Ethan, once lost in routine and regret, finally felt whole. That night, Ethan walked the same street where it had all begun. The city was still loud, still indifferent, but he wasn't. He paused, watching people pass, wondering how many cries went unheard every day. He knew now that not every story ended like his and Leo's, but he also knew this. Every time someone chooses to stop, to truly listen, something shifts in the world. It might be small, it might be invisible, but it matters. Ethan turned away from the street and headed home, heart full, life changed. All because one cry was heard. Years later, Ethan often wondered how different his life would have been if he hadn't stopped that night. The question didn't haunt him, it humbled him. He had learned that destiny wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it arrived as a quiet test of conscience. Leo stayed in touch, even as adulthood pulled him forward. College calls replaced childhood drawings. Deep conversations replaced bedtime questions. But the connection never weakened. It matured. One evening, Leo called unexpectedly. His voice carried nervous excitement. "I'm volunteering at the shelter," he said. "With kids." Ethan smiled, eyes closing. Leo continued, "There was a boy today, sitting alone. Everyone walked past him. I almost did too." Ethan held his breath. "But then," Leo said softly, "I remembered." That was when Ethan understood the true power of compassion. It multiplies. What begins as one act doesn't end with one life changed. It travels. Quietly. Patiently. Leo didn't become who he was despite his pain. He became who he was because someone acknowledged it. And Ethan realized something profound. The moment he stopped wasn't just a turning point. It was a legacy in motion. Leo returned home that winter, older now, carrying confidence where fear once lived. They walked the city streets together, passing the same curb where everything began. "Do you remember?" Leo asked. Ethan nodded. Every detail. Leo stood still, staring at the pavement. "I don't remember the cold," he said. "I remember the sound, and the silence before you turned back." Ethan swallowed. Leo smiled gently. "That silence almost taught me I didn't matter." They stood there quietly, honoring the weight of what almost was. "I used to think being strong meant surviving alone," Leo said. "Now I know it means letting yourself be seen." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder, and letting yourself see others. They continued walking, blending back into the crowd, not as strangers anymore, but as proof that kindness leaves fingerprints long after the moment has passed. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. Somewhere else, another cried. And somewhere between those moments lived the choice, to stop or walk away. Time softened the sharp edges of memory, but never erased their meaning. Ethan aged with peace in his heart, no longer haunted by the feeling that his life lacked purpose. Leo built a future rooted in empathy. He chose work that involved people, listening to stories others overlooked. He didn't need recognition. He understood impact didn't always come with applause. During a quiet visit, Leo said, "I don't think you ever realized what you gave me." Ethan chuckled softly. "I barely knew what I was doing." "That's the point," Leo replied. "You didn't try to be a hero. You were just human." That word lingered. Human. Flawed. Afraid. Still capable of love. They sat together, sharing silence that once would have been uncomfortable, but now felt full. Because sometimes the greatest gift isn't fixing someone's life. It's showing them they're worth fixing. On a rainy evening, Ethan received a letter, handwritten. Inside was a simple note. "I heard someone cry today," it read, "and I didn't walk away." Ethan smiled through tears. The chain continued. That night, he understood something final and beautiful. The world doesn't change through perfection. It changes through people who choose compassion, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's scary, even when it costs something. And all because, once upon a time, a man stopped walking. The city still rushed, still ignored, still hurried past pain. But somewhere within it lived countless unseen moments, quiet choices that altered lives forever. Ethan's story was never about saving a child. It was about listening. And Leo's life was never defined by abandonment. It was defined by being heard. Because sometimes, all it takes to change a life is turning back. Some cries are quiet. Some moments pass unseen. But when one heart chooses compassion, everything changes. If this story touched you, gently like, subscribe, and join our Heart Angels family, where stories remind us that humanity still listens.